The gunshot echoed through the narrow mountain pass just as Gabriel Owens emerged from the pines with 3 beaver pelts draped over his broad shoulders. And though he had spent the last 8 years alone in these rugged peaks, something about the woman's scream that followed made his heart stop cold. He dropped the pelts and ran toward the sound, his long, dark hair whipping behind him as his muscular legs carried him swiftly down the rocky slope. The Wyoming Territory in 1878 was unforgiving country, and a woman's voice this deep in the wilderness meant trouble of the worst kind. Gabriel's hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt as he crashed through the underbrush, his powerful frame moving with surprising grace for a man who stood well over 6 feet and was built like a grizzly. When he broke through the tree line, he saw them. 4 men on horseback surrounding a wagon with a broken wheel, and standing beside it with a rifle raised was a woman in a dusty blue dress, her dark hair falling loose from its pins. She fired again, and one of the men cursed and wheeled his horse away. "Leave me be!" she shouted, her voice strong despite the tremor Gabriel could hear beneath it. "I have nothing worth stealing." "That is for us to decide, lady," one of the men called back, a cruel laugh in his voice. Gabriel did not hesitate. He stepped out of the trees with his rifle already raised. The lady said, "Leave her be." All 4 men turned to look at him, and Gabriel saw their eyes widen slightly at the sight of him. He knew what they saw. A mountain man who had not seen civilization in months, with buckskin clothing stretched tight across a chest and arms corded with muscle from years of hard living. His face was weathered and tanned, his jaw covered with a thick beard, and his eyes were the cold gray of a winter sky. "This is not your concern, mountain man," the leader said, though his hand moved toward his pistol. "I am making it my concern." Gabriel's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "Ride on, or I will put you down where you sit." The tension stretched between them like a bowstring pulled taut. Then the woman fired again, deliberately aiming high, and the horses spooked. The men struggled to control their mounts, and in that moment of confusion, Gabriel fired a shot that kicked up dirt directly in front of the leader's horse. "Next one goes through your chest," Gabriel said. The men looked at each other, weighing their options. They were 4 against 2, but the mountain man looked like he could take all of them with his bare hands, and the woman had already proven she knew how to shoot. Finally, the leader spat into the dust. "This territory is getting too crowded anyway," he muttered, and jerked his horse's head around. The other 3 followed, and within moments they were riding hard back down the trail. Gabriel kept his rifle raised until they disappeared around the bend, then slowly lowered it and turned to the woman. She was lowering her own rifle, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. When she looked up at him, the late afternoon sun caught her face, and Gabriel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He knew that smile. Even trembling with fear and relief, even after 8 long years, he knew that smile. "Bethany?" The name came out as barely more than a whisper. Her eyes widened, and she took a step closer, squinting at him through the dust and fading light. "Gabriel? Gabriel Owens?" "Sweet Lord," he breathed, and found himself crossing the distance between them without conscious thought. "Bethany Parker, I thought I would never see you again." She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and suddenly they were standing face to face, close enough to touch but not quite doing so, just staring at each other with wonder and disbelief. "You look so different," she said, her eyes roaming over his face. "But your eyes, I would know those eyes anywhere." Gabriel felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away since the day the wagon train split up in Utah Territory all those years ago. "You have not changed at all," he said, though it was not quite true. She had been 18 then, pretty and bright-eyed and full of dreams about California. Now she was a woman grown, perhaps 26, with fine lines around her eyes and a sadness in them that had not been there before. "That is kind of you to say, but I suspect I look as trail-worn as I feel." She glanced back at her wagon. "My wheel broke about 2 miles back. I've been trying to fix it all afternoon when those men came along." "You are alone out here." Gabriel looked around, half expecting to see a husband or traveling companions. Something shuddered in her expression. "I am now. My husband died 6 months ago. Influenza. I am sorry." And he was. though he could not deny the small, shameful flutter of hope in his chest at the word husband in past tense. Thank you. She looked down at her hands, still gripping the rifle. I was trying to make it to Alpine, Texas. My sister lives there with her family, but clearly I did not plan this journey as well as I should have. Alpine is 300 miles south of here, maybe more, Gabriel said, frowning. You came all that way alone? I joined up with a merchant's caravan in Fort Collins, but they were moving too slowly and I thought I could make better time on my own. She gave a rueful laugh. Pride goes before a fall, I suppose. Gabriel moved past her to examine the wagon wheel. It was not just broken, but completely shattered, the wood splintered beyond any quick repair. He ran his hand over it, thinking. This wheel is done for, he said finally, but I have a camp about 3 miles north of here. I can bring my horse and we can transfer your supplies to it. Then you can ride while I walk. We can make Alpine, but it will take time. Bethany looked at him searchingly. I cannot ask you to abandon your life here to escort me across 300 miles of territory. You are not asking. I am offering. Gabriel met her eyes steadily. Besides, I was thinking it might be time to come down from the mountain anyway. A man can only talk to beavers for so long before he starts expecting them to answer back. That won a small smile from her, and Gabriel felt absurdly pleased with himself. I remember you being quieter, she said. On the wagon train, you barely spoke to anyone. I was 19 and terrified of pretty girls, he admitted, especially ones who smiled at me the way you did. Color rose in her cheeks. I thought you had not noticed. I noticed. He had noticed everything about her during those long months crossing the plains, the way she laughed, the way she helped the other women with their children, the way she sang while doing her chores. He had been too young and too poor and too uncertain of himself to do anything about it. But he had noticed. Your family was heading to California for the gold fields. We made it there too. My father struck a small claim, enough to get us by. I met Thomas in Sacramento. She paused, and Gabriel saw grief flicker across her face. He was a good man, kind. He wanted a ranch in Texas, so we moved there 3 years ago, built a small place outside of Austin. But you are going to Alpine now? After Thomas died, I could not manage the ranch alone. I sold it and decided to start fresh near my sister. She looked around at the darkening forest. Though I am beginning to wonder if I made the right choice. You did, Gabriel said firmly. You just had some bad luck with that wheel. Come on, let us start moving what we can carry. It will be full dark soon and we should get to my camp. They worked together as the sun sank below the peaks, sorting through Bethany's belongings and packing what was essential. Gabriel was struck by how little she had. Some clothes, a few books, a small chest that she said contained her mother's jewelry and some letters. Everything she owned in the world fit into 2 packs. I travel light these days, she said when she caught him looking. Possessions just weigh you down. Gabriel thought of his own sparse existence in the mountains and nodded. He had been living with barely more than she carried, and he had been content enough. But as they walked through the gathering darkness toward his camp, with Bethany following close behind him on the narrow trail, he realized how empty that contentment had been. How many years he had spent trying not to think about civilization, about connection, about a girl on a wagon train who had smiled at him like he mattered. His camp was exactly as he had left it that morning. A lean-to shelter built against a rock face, a fire pit ringed with stones, his few tools and traps arranged neatly. It was a rough place, a hard place, but it had been home. It is not much, he said as Bethany looked around. It is more than I have at the moment, she replied, and it is safe. That is all that matters. Gabriel built up the fire while Bethany settled herself on a log he had dragged there for seating. He could feel her watching him as he worked, and it made him intensely aware of every movement. He put coffee on to boil and dug out some dried venison from his stores. I'm sorry I do not have anything fancier to offer, he said, handing her some of the meat. This is perfect. She bit into it and closed her eyes. I have not had a proper meal since yesterday. Thank you, Gabriel. The way she said his name, soft and familiar, made warmth spread through his chest. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the night sounds of the forest around them. Tell me about these 8 years, Bethany said finally. How did a boy from a wagon train become a mountain man? Gabriel poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. After we split up in Utah, my family went on to Oregon. We homesteaded there for about 2 years, but my father died of a snake bite, and my mother remarried quickly. Her new husband did not much like having a grown stepson around, so I left. Worked my way east doing odd jobs until I ended up here in Wyoming. Found I liked the solitude, liked the mountains. I've been here ever since. Do you ever see your mother? I send her letters through the trading post when I go in for supplies. She writes back occasionally. She has 2 more children now with her new husband. She seems happy enough. He did not mention how much it had hurt to be pushed out, to become an inconvenience in his own family. What about you? Did your family stay in California? Bethany's expression grew sad. My father died 4 years ago. Cave-in at the mine. My mother passed the following winter from grief, I think, as much as from the cold. My brother went to San Francisco to seek his fortune, and I have not heard from him in over a year. Just my sister Sarah left now, which is why I am going to her. I am sorry. You have lost so much. We all lose things, she said quietly. It is what we do after the loss that matters, I suppose. They talked long into the night, sharing the stories of the years that had separated them. Gabriel found himself telling her things he had never told anyone. About the loneliness he sometimes felt, about the nightmares he still had from watching his father die, about the peace he found in the mountains that he could not find anywhere else. And Bethany told him about her marriage to Thomas, about how he had been patient and good, but how she had never quite felt the passion she had read about in books, about the baby she had lost 2 years ago, born too early to survive, about the fear she carried now that she was alone in the world with no real home to call her own. You are brave, Gabriel said when she finished. Braver than most men I know, to set out alone like you did. I do not feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time. She looked at him across the fire. But I am glad I ran into you, or that you ran into me, rather. I do not think I would have survived those men without you. You were holding them off pretty well on your own, for the moment, but I only had a few more rounds, and they would have figured that out soon enough. She shivered despite the fire's warmth. Thank you, Gabriel. Truly. You do not need to thank me. He wanted to reach across the fire and take her hand, to tell her that he would protect her from anything, but he kept his hands wrapped around his coffee cup instead. We should get some rest. We have a long journey ahead of us. He gave her his bedroll and arranged himself by the fire with just a blanket. It was a warm summer night, and he had slept in worse conditions, but he was intensely aware of her presence just a few feet away. He lay awake long after her breathing had evened out into sleep, staring at the stars through the pine branches and trying to calm the wild hope that was building in his chest. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Gabriel woke before Bethany and checked his traps one last time, gathering what furs he had accumulated. He would trade them at the next town they came to for supplies for their journey. When he returned to camp, she was awake and had somehow managed to make the fire presentable again and heat the leftover coffee. I hope you do not mind, she said. I'm used to making myself useful. Mind? I'm impressed. Gabriel accepted the coffee gratefully. Most people cannot figure out my camp setup. They broke camp efficiently, Gabriel loading everything onto his sturdy mountain horse, a gray gelding he had named Smoke. Bethany insisted on walking at first, but Gabriel would have none of it. You ride, he said firmly. I am used to walking these mountains. You are not. But it is your horse, and I am choosing to let you ride it. Please, Bethany, let me do this. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded and allowed him to help her mount. His hands spanned her waist easily as he lifted her, and he was aware of how small she felt, how delicate compared to his own bulk. But he had seen her face down those men yesterday, had seen the steel in her spine. She was stronger than she looked. They set out south, following game trails and old paths that Gabriel knew by heart. The going was slow at first as they navigated the mountainous terrain, but Gabriel knew these peaks like he knew his own heartbeat. He led them steadily downward, always choosing the safest routes. As they walked, they talked. Bethany asked him about the wildlife, about how he survived the harsh winters, about what he did with his days. Gabriel found himself telling her everything, showing off a bit if he was honest with himself. When they came across a stream, he pointed out the signs of beaver activity. When an eagle soared overhead, he told her about watching a pair raise their young in a nest high on a cliff face. "You love it here," she observed. "I did," he said, then corrected himself. "I do, but it is not a full life, Bethany. I see that now. A man needs more than just mountains and silence." She was quiet for a moment. "What does a man need?" Gabriel looked up at her, at the way the sunlight caught in her dark hair, at the softness in her eyes when she looked back at him. "Someone to talk to at night, someone to share the beauty with, someone to care about when winter comes." "That sounds lonely, the way you describe your life before." "It was. I just did not let myself think about it much." He paused. "Seeing you again made me realize how much I have been missing." Color rose in her cheeks and she looked away, but he saw the small smile playing at her lips. They made camp that night beside a clear stream, with a view of the valley spreading out below them. Gabriel caught 2 trout for their dinner, and Bethany produced a small pot from her belongings and made them into a proper meal with some wild onions she found growing nearby. "You are good at this," Gabriel said as he ate. "Better than me, and I have been living out here for years. My mother taught me to make do with what I had. It serves me well." She looked at him seriously. "Gabriel, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why did you never speak to me on the wagon train? I tried to get your attention so many times, but you always seemed to avoid me." Gabriel set down his plate, his heart suddenly pounding. "I thought you were too fine for someone like me. You were educated, well-spoken, pretty. I was just a poor farmer's son who could barely write his own name. I figured you were just being kind to everyone, that there was nothing special about the way you smiled at me." "Gabriel Owens, I was trying to encourage you for months," Bethany said, and there was exasperation mixed with fondness in her voice. "I thought you were the most interesting person on that entire train. You were kind to the children, you worked harder than anyone else, and you had these eyes that saw everything. I wanted so badly for you to talk to me, really talk to me, but you never did. I was a fool." We were both young. She reached across the fire, and this time she did take his hand. Her fingers were small and warm in his. "But we are not young anymore, Gabriel, and I do not want to waste any more time on regrets." Gabriel turned her hand over in his, marveling at the simple fact of her touch. "What are you saying, Bethany?" "I'm saying that finding you here, after all these years, feels like fate, like maybe all the hard things that happened were leading us back to each other." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm saying that I feel something when I look at you, something I have not felt in a long time, maybe something I never really felt before, not like this." Gabriel's breath caught in his chest. He moved around the fire to sit beside her on the log, still holding her hand. Up close, he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender that still clung to her despite days on the trail. "I have thought about you for 8 years, he said roughly. "Every time I saw a pretty woman in a town, I compared her to you. Every time I was alone in my camp, I wondered what you were doing, if you were happy, if you ever thought of me. And now you are here, and I am afraid to believe this is real." "It is real," she whispered. "I am here, and I am telling you that I feel it too. Whatever this is between us, I feel it." Gabriel lifted his free hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek. Her skin was soft beneath his rough palm. "I am not the same boy you knew. The mountains have made me hard. You saved me from those men. You have been nothing but gentle and kind since the moment you found me. I do not think you are as hard as you believe." She leaned into his touch. "And I am not the same girl either. Life has taught me what matters and what does not. This matters, Gabriel. You matter." He kissed her then, unable to hold back any longer. It was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid the other might vanish like morning mist. But when she sighed against his mouth and her hand came up to tangle in his long hair, the kiss deepened into something urgent and real and right. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want to rush you. You are still grieving your husband. Thomas was a good man and I cared for him, but what I feel right now is not grief," Bethany said honestly. "I grieved for him these past 6 months, and I will always be grateful for the kindness he showed me. But Gabriel, I do not think I ever loved him the way I could love you. The way I think I already am starting to love you." Gabriel pulled back to look at her, searching her face. "You mean that?" "I have never meant anything more." She smiled, that same smile he remembered from 8 years ago, but deeper now, full of a woman's understanding rather than a girl's hope. "I know it is fast. I know we have only been reunited for a day, but I also know that I feel more alive sitting here with you than I have felt in years. I am not going to ignore that." "Neither am I." Gabriel kissed her again, softer this time. A promise rather than a question. "We will take this journey south together. We will get you to your sister in Alpine. And then, if you still feel this way, if you still want me, I will court you properly. I will do this right, Bethany." "I will still feel this way," she said with certainty. "But yes, let us do this right. Let us take our time and be sure." They stayed up late again that night, but this time they sat close together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They talked about everything and nothing, making up for lost years and building something new at the same time. Gabriel told her about his dreams of maybe having a ranch someday, of raising horses in good country. Bethany told him about her love of reading, about how she had always wanted to learn to really ride rather than just sit in a wagon. "I could teach you," Gabriel offered. "Smoke is gentle enough and you are already getting a feel for him." "I would like that," she yawned and snuggled closer to him. "I would like to learn a lot of things from you, Gabriel Owens." The next week passed in a blur of travel and discovery. They made their way steadily south, out of the high mountains and into rolling foothills. Gabriel taught Bethany how to really ride, how to move with the horse rather than against it. She was a quick learner and fearless, laughing when Smoke broke into a canter and clinging to his mane with delight rather than terror. In turn, she taught Gabriel things he had forgotten in his years alone. How to really cook rather than just char meat over a fire. How to find joy in small things, like the way light filtered through leaves or the sound of rain on canvas. How to talk about feelings rather than just burying them deep. They kissed often, unable to resist the pull between them, but Gabriel was true to his word about taking things slow. He wanted to prove to her, and maybe to himself, that this was more than just loneliness or proximity. This was real and worth doing right. One evening, about 10 days into their journey, they camped near a small settlement. It was barely more than a trading post and a few scattered houses, but it had a general store. Gabriel traded his furs for supplies and bought Bethany a new dress to replace the one that was growing worn from travel. It was simple calico, but her eyes lit up when she saw it. "You did not have to do this," she said. "I wanted to." Gabriel felt awkward suddenly, like the 19-year-old boy he had been. "I thought maybe you would like something that was not trail-worn." She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you. It is perfect." While Bethany changed in the store's back room, Gabriel spoke with the shopkeeper about the route to Alpine. The man confirmed they were heading the right direction, but warned about Comanche activity to the south. "They have been mostly peaceful lately, but you can never be too careful," the shopkeeper said. "A man and a woman alone, you make tempting targets." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "We will be careful." When Bethany emerged in her new dress, looking fresh and lovely, Gabriel felt his resolve strengthen. He would get her to Alpine safely. Nothing would happen to her, not while he drew breath. They continued south, entering Colorado Territory and then dropping down toward New Mexico. The landscape changed from mountains to high desert, the air growing drier and hotter. Gabriel rationed their water carefully, and they traveled in the early morning and evening, resting during the heat of the day. It was during one of these midday rests, camped in the shade of a rock outcropping, that Bethany asked the question Gabriel had been half dreading. "What will you do after we reach Alpine? Will you go back to the mountains?" Gabriel looked at her, at the hope and fear mingled in her expression. "I have been thinking about that. The truth is, I do not want to go back. Not to the same life I had before, anyway." "What do you want?" "I want to find a piece of land somewhere, maybe in Texas. Start that horse ranch I told you about." He reached for her hand. "And I want you with me, Bethany, if you will have me. Not right away, not before you are ready, but someday. I want to build a life with you." Tears filled her eyes, but she was smiling. "I want that too, more than anything. Then we will make it happen. We will get you settled with your sister, let you catch your breath and be sure. And when you are ready, I will be waiting." She kissed him then, deep and sure, and Gabriel felt the last piece of his heart that he had been guarding click into place. This was right. This was what he had been meant to find. They pressed on with renewed purpose. The miles fell away beneath them as they crossed into Texas, the land growing more familiar to Bethany, who had lived in the state for years. She pointed out landmarks, told him about the towns they passed, painted pictures of what their life could be like. 3 weeks after leaving Gabriel's mountain camp, they finally reached Alpine. It was a small town nestled in a valley, surrounded by rugged hills. As they rode down the main street, Bethany sat up straighter, looking around. "There," she said, pointing to a small house at the edge of town. "That is Sarah's place." Gabriel guided Smoke toward the house, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment when he would have to leave her, at least for now, the moment when the dream had to pause and become reality. Before they could dismount, the door of the house flew open, and a woman rushed out. She looked like Bethany, but shorter, rounder, with the same dark hair and bright eyes. "Bethany!" she cried, and pulled her sister down from the horse into a fierce embrace. "Thank God you are here. I was so worried when you did not arrive weeks ago." "I had some trouble on the road," Bethany said, returning the hug just as fiercely. "But it turned out to be the best kind of trouble." Sarah pulled back and looked at Gabriel for the first time. Her eyes widened at the sight of him, still trail-worn and rough despite his best efforts to make himself presentable. "Sarah, this is Gabriel Owens," Bethany said, her voice warm. "He saved my life and escorted me all the way here from Wyoming Territory. Gabriel, this is my sister, Sarah Mitchell." "Madam," Gabriel touched his hat respectfully. Sarah looked between them, clearly seeing more than just a simple escort situation. A smile played at her lips. "Well, any friend of Bethany's is welcome here. Please come in. You both must be exhausted." The house was small but tidy, and Sarah's husband Robert was a quiet, kind man who worked as a carpenter in town. They had 3 children, all under the age of 8, who stared at Gabriel with wide eyes until he smiled at them, and they shyly smiled back. Over dinner, Bethany told her sister an edited version of their journey, leaving out the parts about their growing feelings, but clearly unable to hide the way she looked at Gabriel. Sarah caught her eye more than once with a knowing look. After the meal, while Robert played with the children and Bethany helped Sarah clean up, Gabriel stepped outside. He needed air, needed to think. In a few hours, he would leave this house and find somewhere to stay in town. He and Bethany had agreed she needed time with her family, time to settle and be sure about what she wanted. But leaving her even temporarily felt like ripping off his own skin. "She loves you, you know." Gabriel turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "I hope so, madam. I certainly love her." Sarah stepped closer, studying him. Thomas was a good man, but he was not the right man for her. I could see that, even if Bethany could not. She tried to be happy and she was content enough, but there was no spark, no passion. She smiled. "There is passion when she looks at you." "I would do anything for her," Gabriel said quietly. "I would build her a home, protect her, spend every day trying to make her happy, if she will have me. Give her a few days to settle in. Let her remember what it feels like to be around family, to have a home, and then ask her properly." Sarah's eyes twinkled. "Something tells me you will not be waiting long for an answer." Gabriel spent the next 3 days in a rented room above the general store, trying to give Bethany space but finding excuses to see her every day. He helped Robert with some carpentry work, fixed a fence for the neighbor, made himself useful around town. And every evening, he would stop by the Mitchell house for dinner, and afterward, he and Bethany would walk through the town together. I like it here," Bethany said on the 3rd evening as they strolled past the small church. "It feels peaceful, safe." "It is good country," Gabriel agreed. "I've been asking around about land for sale. There's a nice piece about 5 miles south of here, 200 acres with a creek running through it. Owner is moving back east and wants to sell." Bethany stopped walking and turned to face him. "Are you thinking of buying it?" "I'm thinking of putting an offer in, if I have a reason to." He took her hands in his. "Bethany Parker, I know we said we would wait, give you time to be sure. But I have to ask, are you sure yet? Because I am. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Her smile could have lit up the whole valley. "I am sure, Gabriel. I have been sure since that first night in your camp. Maybe I was sure 8 years ago when I first saw you on that wagon train. I just did not know it yet." Gabriel pulled her close, not caring who might see. "Then marry me. Let me buy that land and build you a home. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Gabriel, I will marry you." He kissed her there in the street, both of them laughing with joy. When they finally pulled apart, Bethany was crying and smiling at the same time. "How soon?" she asked. "How soon can we do this?" "As soon as you want. We could talk to the preacher tomorrow, have the bands read on Sunday. We could be married within a month." "A month feels like forever." "Then we will make it 3 weeks." Gabriel wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "I have waited 8 years for this. I can wait 3 more weeks to do it right." They told Sarah and Robert that night, and Sarah cried with happiness while Robert clapped Gabriel on the back and welcomed him to the family. The children were delighted at the prospect of Aunt Bethany staying permanently and having an uncle who looked like a mountain man. The next morning, Gabriel rode out to see the land. The owner, an older man named Mr. Hendricks, was happy to show him around. It was beautiful country, rolling hills with good grass, the creek running clear and cold, and a stand of oak trees that would provide perfect shade for a house. "I will take it," Gabriel said. "I can pay half now with the furs and cash I have, and the rest within 6 months. You have yourself a deal, son." Mr. Hendricks shook his hand. "This is good land. Treat it right, and it will treat you right." Gabriel rode back to town with his heart full. He had land, he had a future, and in 3 weeks he would have Bethany as his wife. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah and the other women in town took charge of planning a small wedding at the church. Gabriel worked from dawn to dusk on the land, starting to build a house. Robert and several other men from town came out to help, and what would have taken Gabriel months alone began to take shape in weeks. It would not be fancy, but it would be sturdy. 3 rooms to start with plans to add more later. A fireplace, real windows, a solid roof. A home worthy of bringing a bride to. Bethany came out to see it 1 week before the wedding. Gabriel helped her down from the wagon Robert had driven them in and led her to the half-built structure. "It is not much yet," he said, suddenly nervous, "but it will be tight and warm, and we can add on as we need to." Bethany walked through the framed-out rooms, running her hands over the wood. "It is perfect," she said softly. "Gabriel, it is absolutely perfect. You deserve better. You deserve a mansion." She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "I deserve a home filled with love. That is exactly what this will be." Gabriel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this choice. I could never regret choosing you." The wedding took place on a Sunday afternoon in late September. The little church was packed with townspeople, curious to see the mountain man and the widow who had found each other after so many years. Bethany wore a simple white dress that Sarah had helped her make, with flowers in her hair. Gabriel had trimmed his beard and hair, bought new clothes, scrubbed himself until he shone. When Bethany walked down the aisle on Robert's arm, Gabriel felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was so beautiful, so full of joy, and she was choosing him. The boy who had been too afraid to speak to her 8 years ago. The man who had hidden in the mountains to avoid feeling anything. They said their vows in clear, strong voices. Gabriel slid a simple gold band onto her finger, one he had bought with the last of his fur money. And when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Gabriel kissed her with all the love and promise he could pour into that single moment. The celebration afterward was joyful and loud. The whole town had contributed food and drink. There was music and dancing, and Gabriel found himself swept into it all despite his years of solitude. He danced with his new wife, with her sister, with half the women in town who all wanted to meet the mysterious mountain man. But his eyes always found their way back to Bethany, and hers to him. And when they finally slipped away in the evening to the house Robert had lent them for the night, both of them were breathless with anticipation. Gabriel carried her over the threshold, making her laugh. "We are not at our real home yet. Anywhere with you is home," she said, and kissed him. That night they came together as husband and wife, learning each other with tenderness and passion. Gabriel had been with women before, brief encounters in towns during his wandering years, but nothing had prepared him for this, for the intimacy of truly being with someone he loved, someone who loved him back. Bethany was soft and warm in his arms, whispering his name like a prayer, and Gabriel felt something fundamental shift inside him. He was no longer alone. He would never be alone again. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight, Bethany traced the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. "Tell me about these." "That one is from a bear when I was 21, Gabriel said, pointing to a long mark across his ribs. "That one is from a fall on some rocks. That one is from a fight in a saloon that I was stupid enough to get involved in." "You have lived such a hard life." "It made me strong enough to protect you." He caught her hand and kissed her fingers. "Everything I went through led me here, to this moment. I would not change any of it." "Not even the years we lost?" Gabriel considered that. "Maybe those. But maybe we needed those years to become the people we are now, people who are ready for this. That is a wise way to look at it." She snuggled against his chest. "I am happy, Gabriel, happier than I have ever been." "So am I, wife. So am I." They moved into their new house 2 weeks later. It was finished enough to live in, though Gabriel would continue working on improvements. Bethany threw herself into making it a home, hanging curtains she had sewn, arranging the simple furniture, planting a garden beside the house. Gabriel started building up a herd of horses, buying a few wild ones from local ranchers and breaking them gently. He had a gift for it, Bethany discovered. The horses seemed to trust him instinctively, responding to his calm strength. Their life settled into a rhythm. Gabriel would work with the horses and tend to the land. Bethany managed the house and garden and started taking in sewing from town to bring in extra money. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch Gabriel had built, watching the sun set over their land, talking about their day and their dreams. "I want children," Bethany said one evening about 3 months after their wedding. "I know I lost the baby with Thomas, but I want to try again, with you." Gabriel pulled her close. "I want that too. A house full of children, boys to teach about horses, girls to spoil rotten. We will see what the Lord provides." She kissed his jaw. "But I have a feeling we will be blessed." She was right. By spring, Bethany was pregnant. Gabriel was beside himself with worry and joy, hovering over her constantly until she laughingly told him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "I am strong," she reminded him. "I survived a broken wagon, a journey across half the territory, and married a mountain man. I can handle having a baby." Still, Gabriel could not help his protectiveness. He made sure she never lifted anything heavy, brought her breakfast in bed, rubbed her feet when they swelled. Sarah teased him mercilessly about being a mother hen, but Bethany just smiled and let him fuss. Their son was born in December of 1879, a month early but healthy and strong. They named him Benjamin Thomas Owens, after Gabriel's father and Bethany's first husband. Gabriel held the tiny bundle with shaking hands, awed by the perfect small fingers, the tuft of dark hair, the blue eyes that would eventually turn gray like his own. "We made this," he whispered. "We made a whole person." Bethany, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him. "We make a good team." Benjamin was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh. Gabriel was completely devoted to him, getting up for nighttime feedings despite Bethany's protests, carrying him in a sling while he worked with the horses. The sight of the big, muscular mountain man with a tiny baby strapped to his chest became a familiar one around their ranch. The business grew steadily. Gabriel's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people came from surrounding counties to buy his horses or have him train theirs. Money was still tight sometimes, but they always had enough. More importantly, they had each other, and they had their son. When Benjamin was 18 months old, Bethany became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin girls in the summer of 1881. They named them Grace and Emma, and Gabriel was absolutely smitten with his daughters. He was gentle as could be with them, singing them to sleep with old songs he remembered from his childhood, teaching them to ride almost before they could walk. Life was full and rich and good. They had expanded the house, adding more rooms for the growing family. They had a barn and a proper corral now, with nearly 20 horses. They had friends in town, family nearby, and Sarah and her brood. They had built something real and lasting. One evening, when Benjamin was 4 and the twins were almost 2, Gabriel and Bethany sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Benjamin was helping his little sisters pick flowers, patient and protective. "Do you ever miss it?" Bethany asked. "The mountains, the solitude?" Gabriel pulled her against his side. Not for a second. That life was just me waiting. This is actually living. No regrets about a 19-year-old boy being too shy to talk to a girl on a wagon train? Maybe one small regret about losing those years, but we found our way back to each other. That is what matters. Bethany turned her face up to his. I love you, Gabriel Owens. Every stubborn, protective, wonderful part of you. I love you too. You and those 3 miracles out there are the best things that ever happened to me. They kissed as the sun set over their land, their children's laughter floating on the evening breeze. It was a simple moment, but it held everything. Years of loneliness ended. Hearts that had been waiting found. A love that had survived time and distance and hardship. The years continued to pass in a blur of joy and hard work. Their ranch became one of the most respected in the area. Gabriel's horses were known throughout Texas for their quality and gentle temperament. Bethany became a pillar of the community, helping organize church socials and teaching other women to sew. Benjamin grew into a strong, quiet boy, much like his father. At 8 years old, he could already gentle a wild horse better than most grown men. The twins, Grace and Emma, were 7 now and completely different from each other. Grace was daring and wild, always climbing trees and racing her horse. Emma was quieter, more bookish, but with a stubborn streak that reminded Gabriel of her mother. In 1886, Bethany gave birth to their 4th child, another boy they named Samuel. Gabriel was 42 now, his hair shot through with gray, but he was as strong as ever and just as devoted to his family. 4 children, he marveled, holding baby Samuel while Bethany rested. When I was alone in those mountains, I never imagined I would be so blessed. God had plans for you, Bethany said. Her own hair showed touches of silver now, and there were lines around her eyes, but to Gabriel she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He just had to wait for the right time to bring us back together. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, Gabriel would think back to that day in the mountain pass. What if he had been an hour later? What if those men had not stopped Bethany's wagon? What if he had not recognized her smile after all those years? But he did not dwell on those what-ifs. He had learned that life was not about the path not taken, but about making the most of the path you were on. And his path had led him here, to this woman, to these children, to this life he had never dared to dream of. The children grew and thrived. Benjamin, at 16, was already talking about starting his own horse ranch someday. The twins, now 15, were beginning to draw attention from boys in town, much to Gabriel's dismay. They are too young for courting, he grumbled to Bethany one evening. She laughed and patted his arm. They are the same age I was when I first noticed you on that wagon train, remember? That is different. How is it different? Because I am their father and no boy is good enough for them. Bethany just shook her head, smiling. They have you to set the standard, my love. Any boy who wants to court our daughters will have to prove himself worthy, just like you did. Samuel, at 8 years old, was shaping up to be a scholar. He loved books as much as horses, and Gabriel and Bethany encouraged both interests. They had done well enough over the years to afford to send him to school in town, and he was top of his class. In 1894, when Gabriel was 50 and Bethany was 42, they welcomed one more unexpected blessing. A baby girl they named Charlotte, born in the spring with a shock of dark hair and her father's gray eyes. The older children doted on her, and Gabriel found himself starting the whole beautiful cycle over again with nighttime feedings and lullabies. We are too old for this, Bethany said with a laugh as Charlotte kept them up most of one night. Speak for yourself, woman, Gabriel teased. I have plenty of years left in me. And he did. Though his hair was fully gray now and his back sometimes ached in the mornings, Gabriel was still strong. He still worked with the horses every day, still made love to his wife, with passion, still played with his children and grandchildren with abandon. Because Benjamin had married at 21, bringing home a sweet girl named Lucy, and they had given Gabriel and Bethany their first grandchild when Gabriel was 49. Now, 5 years later, Benjamin and Lucy had 3 children of their own, and the ranch rang with the sound of multiple generations. One of the twins, Grace, had married a rancher from the next county and moved away, though she visited often. Emma had married the schoolteacher in Alpine and lived in town. Samuel was away at university in Austin, studying to be a lawyer. and little Charlotte was growing like a weed, already 6 years old and begging to ride the wildest horses. Gabriel and Bethany would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set just as they had done for over 20 years of marriage, and marvel at what they had built. "Do you remember that first night in your camp?" Bethany asked one evening. "When we sat by the fire and told each other our stories?" "I remember everything about those days," Gabriel said. "I remember thinking I could not believe you were real, that you were actually there after all those years. I thought the same thing. You looked so different from the boy I remembered, but your eyes were the same. Kind and true." She took his hand. "These have been the happiest years of my life, Gabriel." "Mine too. Every single day with you has been a gift." They sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined, watching their land turn gold in the setting sun. Smoke, the old gray gelding who had carried them on their first journey together, grazed peacefully in the pasture. He was ancient now, retired from work, but still beloved. Charlotte was playing with her dolls in the yard. Benjamin's oldest child, 10-year-old Gabriel Jr., was helping his father with the evening feeding. It was an ordinary evening, but it was everything. It was the life they had built from a chance meeting and a smile recognized after years apart. It was proof that love could survive anything if two people were brave enough to reach for it. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Gabriel pulled Bethany closer. "I would do it all again, you know. Every hard year, every moment of loneliness, if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," she said softly. "So would I." They stayed there on the porch until the night grew cool, talking about their children and grandchildren, making plans for the future, remembering the past. Two people who had been lost and alone, now found and whole. A mountain man and his sweetheart from the wagon train, building a legacy that would last generations. Years continued to flow like the creek through their property, steady and sure. Gabriel turned 60 in 1904, a milestone he never thought he would reach in those hard years alone in the mountains. Bethany organized a huge celebration with all their children and grandchildren present. Even Grace made the journey from her ranch with her husband and 4 children. "Look at what we have created," Bethany whispered to Gabriel as they surveyed the crowd of family filling their house and yard. "Look at all this love." Gabriel felt his throat tighten with emotion. Between their 5 children and the marriages and grandchildren, there were over 20 people present, all connected to them, all carrying forward the love they had fought so hard to build. Samuel had finished law school and passed the bar, and he practiced in San Antonio now. He had married a fellow scholar, a woman named Rebecca who taught at a girls' school, and they had 2 daughters. Emma and her schoolteacher husband had 4 children who were all voracious readers like their parents. Benjamin had taken over most of the daily operations of the ranch, though Gabriel still helped with training the more difficult horses. Charlotte, now 16, was being courted by a young rancher's son, much to Gabriel's continued dismay. "She is a sensible girl," Bethany assured him. "She will make a good choice." "She's too young. She's exactly the age I was when I married Thomas, and 2 years older than I was when I first loved you." Gabriel grumbled, but knew his wife was right. Charlotte had grown into a strong, capable young woman who could ride as well as any man and had a good head on her shoulders. If she chose this boy, Gabriel would trust her judgment. After all, she had learned about love from watching her parents all these years. The ranch continued to prosper. Gabriel's reputation had spread far and wide, and people came from across Texas and beyond to buy his horses. He had trained his children and now his grandchildren in his methods, ensuring the knowledge would continue even after he was gone. But Gabriel was not planning on going anywhere for a long time yet. At 60, he was still vigorous, still working every day, still making love to his wife regularly despite her laughing protests that they were too old for such things. "We will never be too old for this," he would tell her, pulling her close. "Not as long as I draw breath." In 1906, Charlotte married her young rancher, a good man named David, who reminded Gabriel a bit of himself at that age. Strong, hard-working, devoted to Charlotte in a way that eased Gabriel's worried heart. The wedding was another huge family celebration, with all the Owens clan gathered together. Gabriel danced with his youngest daughter, then with Bethany, then with each of his granddaughters. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his gray eyes still sparkled with life and love. "You are still the most handsome man here," Bethany told him as they swayed to the music, "and you are still the most beautiful woman, still wearing that same smile that caught my attention 30 years ago." "Has it really been 30 years since you found me with that broken wagon wheel?" "Nearly. We married in 78, so that is 28 years of marriage, 28 years of waking up next to you." Bethany laid her head on his chest. "Best 28 years of my life." As they entered their 70s, Gabriel and Bethany began to slow down more, though they remained active. They handed over more of the ranch operations to Benjamin and his sons, but Gabriel still went out every morning to check on the horses. He had a special gift with the difficult ones, the wild mustangs that no one else could gentle. Even at 75, he could calm a terrified horse with just his voice and his touch. The grandchildren were having children of their own now, and the ranch was filled with great-grandchildren running around. Gabriel lost count of how many descendants he and Bethany had produced, but he loved every single one of them. Sarah had passed away in 1908, and Bethany had grieved deeply for her sister. But she had her children and grandchildren to comfort her, and Gabriel to hold her through the dark nights. They had learned over the years that loss was part of life, but so was the love that remained. In 1912, Gabriel turned 78. He was slower now, his joints aching more, but his mind was still sharp, and his love for Bethany as strong as ever. They would sit on their porch every evening, a ritual they had maintained for over 30 years, watching the sunset and talking about their day. "Do you think we get to do this in heaven?" Bethany asked one evening. She was 76 now, her hair completely white, her face soft with wrinkles. To Gabriel, she was still the girl from the wagon train, still the woman who had looked at him with hope and love. "If heaven does not include sitting on a porch with you watching the sunset, then I am not interested in going," Gabriel said firmly. Bethany laughed, the sound still as musical as it had been decades ago. "I think we will be together. I cannot imagine eternity any other way." "Neither can I." Gabriel took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years. "You are my home, Bethany. You always have been." They sat in peaceful silence as the sky turned pink and gold and purple. Their land stretched out before them, well-tended and prosperous. Horses grazed in the pastures. In the distance they could see Benjamin's house where several of the great-grandchildren were playing. "We did good," Bethany said softly. "Did we not? We built something good." "We built something beautiful," Gabriel agreed. "A family, a legacy, a love that will last beyond us. I have no regrets." "Neither do I. Well, maybe one." When Bethany looked at him questioningly, he smiled. "I regret that I was too afraid to talk to you on that wagon train. Think of all the years we could have had. We had the years we were meant to have, and we made every one of them count." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, would that shy 19-year-old boy have been ready for me? Would I have been ready for you?" "Probably not," Gabriel admitted. "We needed to grow into the people we became, people who could appreciate what we found." "Exactly." Bethany leaned her head on his shoulder. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to. As the stars began to appear, they made their way inside, moving slowly but still together, still connected after all these years. They climbed into the bed they had shared for decades, and Gabriel pulled Bethany close. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I will love you forever." "I love you too," she replied, "in this life and whatever comes after." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would echo through generations. Gabriel passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1915 at the age of 81. Bethany was beside him, and she said later that he had been smiling. The funeral was enormous, with family coming from all over Texas and beyond to pay their respects to the mountain man who had built an empire on love and hard work. Bethany lived another 3 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days telling stories about Gabriel, about their life together, about the love that had sustained them through everything. When she passed in 1918 at the age of 82, they buried her next to Gabriel on a hill overlooking their ranch. The headstone read simply, Gabriel and Bethany Owens, together in life, together in eternity. Their legacy lived on in the ranch that Benjamin and his sons continued to run. It lived on in the dozens of descendants who carried their blood and their values. It lived on in the stories told around dinner tables about a mountain man who recognized a smile from years past and chose to follow his heart. The old porch where Gabriel and Bethany had sat for so many evenings still stood decades later, worn smooth by time and weather. Their great-great-grandchildren would play there, and sometimes in the evening light, people swore they could see two figures sitting close together, watching the sunset over the land they had loved. It was a love story for the ages. A mountain man and his sweetheart from the wagon train, finding each other when they needed it most, building a life that mattered, leaving behind a legacy of love that would never fade. In a hard land during a hard time, they had created something soft and beautiful and lasting. And somewhere, perhaps on a porch overlooking eternal fields, Gabriel and Bethany were still sitting together, hands intertwined, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. Still in love after all the years, after all the trials, after everything. Together, as they were always meant to be. Their story became legend in Alpine, Texas. The mountain man and the widow, finding love on the trail, building a dynasty through hard work and devotion. Parents told it to their children as an example of true love. Young couples looked to it as proof that the right person was worth waiting for, worth fighting for. The ranch itself became a landmark, passed down through the Owens family for generations. Each new generation added to it, improved it, but always maintained the core values that Gabriel and Bethany had established. Honesty, hard work, family, and above all, love. In the main house, which had been expanded many times over the years, there hung a portrait of Gabriel and Bethany painted when they were in their 50s. Gabriel stood tall and strong behind Bethany's chair, one hand on her shoulder, his gray eyes looking directly at the viewer with that calm, steady gaze. Bethany sat with her hands folded in her lap, wearing that smile that had captivated Gabriel from the first moment he saw it on a wagon train decades before. Every Owens child and grandchild and great-grandchild grew up looking at that portrait, hearing the stories, understanding that they came from something special. They came from a love that had overcome time and distance and loss. They came from two people who had been brave enough to reach for happiness when it appeared, even when it seemed impossible. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Texas hills in that particular shade of gold that seemed to make everything beautiful, members of the Owens family would sometimes find themselves on that old porch, looking out over the land and feeling grateful. Grateful for the mountain man who had been brave enough to step out of the trees all those years ago. Grateful for the woman who had recognized him despite the years and changes. Grateful for the love that had built all of this. Their story was proof that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for. That true love exists and is worth fighting for. That two people, if they are brave enough and true enough, can build something that lasts forever. Gabriel and Bethany Owens had lived well, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. In the annals of the Wild West, among stories of gunfighters and outlaws and fortune seekers, their story stood out as something different, something pure and true and beautiful. A mountain man and his sweetheart. A smile recognized across years. A love that built an empire and lasted beyond death. That was the story of Gabriel and Bethany Owens, and it would be told as long as the sun set over the Texas hills and family gathered to remember where they came from. The end of their mortal story was just the beginning of their eternal legend, and somewhere beyond the sunset, they were together still, building new dreams and loving each other as they always had, forever and always, until the stars themselves burned out and beyond.